The 9 most badass Bible verses. If the Bible had been written by King Leonidas and the rest of the Spartans from 300, it would probably read pretty much the same as it does now. It turns out the Bible is already chock full of ass-kicking. Here are the verses that make us want to take to the streets and put some unbelievers to the sword. Number 9. Exodus chapter 2, verses 11 and 12. One day, after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were, and watched them at their hard labor. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. Glancing this way and that, and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Sure, Moses was a great leader, an emancipator of his people, and a prophet. Most people don't know that he was also the biblical equivalent of Splinter Cell's Sam Fisher, a well-owned killing machine able to slay from the shadows without pity or remorse. Martin Luther King may have had a dream, but Moses had a body count. You can almost picture the scene. An Egyptian soldier is wailing on a hapless Hebrew when Moses, clothed in head-to-toe black, drops down from the ceiling. Moving with cat-like grace, he sneaks up behind the soldier and, taking his head in his hands, snaps the man's neck with one savage twist. As the lifeless body slumps to the ground, Moses lights up a cigar. "Well," he quips, "looks like someone bit off more than he could chew." Moses later defeated the Egyptian pharaoh, who, if we remember correctly, had been using Hebrew slaves to construct a 40-foot-high armored battlesuit capable of launching nuclear missiles to anywhere in the world. Number 8. 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 23 and 24. From there Elisha went up to Bethel. As he was walking along the road, some youths came out of the town and jeered at him. "Go on up, you bald head," they said. "Go on up, you bald head." He turned around, looked at them, and called down a curse on them in the name of the Lord. Then 2 bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of the youths. We've all been there. You're walking along minding your own business when a gang of cocky young bastards starts hurling abuse at you. Most of us would just keep walking, or maybe yell some insults back, or flip them the bird. Elisha, commonly regarded as the Luke Skywalker to the prophet Elijah's Obi-Wan Kenobi, however, decided to take it one step further. Invoking the name of God, he summons motherfucking bears to come and claw the shit out of them. Christians are constantly asking for prayer in schools to help get today's kids in line. But we beg to differ. We need bears in schools. If every teacher had the power to summon a pair of child-maiming grizzly avengers, you can bet that school children nowadays would be the most well-behaved, polite children ever. It's a simple choice. Listen to the biology lesson, or get first-hand knowledge of the digestive system of Ursus horribilis. It should be pointed out that even after his death, Elisha continued to kick ass. In 2 Kings chapter 13, verses 20 to 21, tells us that when a dead body was thrown into his tomb and touched Elisha's bones, it sprang back to life. It's unknown whether Elisha had this power in life as well as death, but we like to think that he did, and that he had the habit of killing his victims with bears, resurrecting them, and then promptly resummoning the bears to kill them again. He'd just repeat the whole thing over and over until he got bored. Number 7. Ezekiel chapter 23, verses 19 and 20. Yet she became more and more promiscuous as she recalled the days of her youth, when she was a prostitute in Egypt. There she lusted after her lovers, whose genitals were like those of donkeys, and whose emission was like that of horses. Contrary to what you may think, the Bible has never shied away from talking about sex. In fact, the entire Song of Solomon is dedicated to describing a couple getting it on, complete with lines like, "I am a wall and my breasts are like towers." This verse is particularly explicit, though, informing us that Egyptians are hung like farmyard animals and can ejaculate in quantities to rival the annual flooding of the Nile. Keep in mind, the Egyptians were the Jews' former slave masters and are the bad guys in this story. So you know their reputation for supreme endowment was well earned, when the worst their enemies could say was, "Go on, go back to those big-cocked bastards. I hope you're happy with their enormous dongs." The old Egyptians didn't exactly run away from their reputation. Egyptian ruins are littered with statues like the one of Min, the god of huge dong having. They even invented the phallic obelisk to advertise it. Washington Monument. That's an obelisk. That was their statement to the world. Gaze upon our dick tower and despair. This passage creates a problem for many new Bible readers. Once you've read this, it is impossible to go back and read the above story of Moses killing the Egyptian guy the same way. When it speaks of the Egyptian beating the Hebrew slave, you have no choice but to imagine him turkey-slapping the man. If anything, however, it makes Moses' deadly intervention all the more justified. Number 6. Judges chapter 3, verses 16 through 23. Now Ehud had made a double-edged sword about 1.5 feet long, which he strapped to his right thigh under his clothing. He presented the tribute to Eglon king of Moab, who was a very fat man. After Ehud had presented the tribute, he sent on their way the men who had carried it. At the idols near Gilgal, he himself turned back and said, "I have a secret message for you, O king." The king said, "Quiet," and all his attendants left him. Ehud then approached him while he was sitting alone in the upper room of his summer palace, and said, "I have a message from God for you." As the king rose from his seat, Ehud reached with his left hand, drew the sword from his right thigh, and plunged it into the king's belly. Even the handle sank in after the blade which had come out his back. Ehud did not pull the sword out, and the fat closed in over it. Then Ehud went out to the porch. He shut the doors of the upper room behind him, and locked them. They say that history repeats itself, and this verse illustrates that clearly. Our hero, Ehud, came up with the idea of concealing a weapon by strapping it to his body several thousand years before John McClane did in Die Hard. Instead of strapping it to his back, Ehud chose to tie it to his thigh. One wonders why the royal guards didn't comment when they frisked Ehud and felt 18 inches of rigid steel in his pants. Well, maybe they just assumed he was Egyptian. After bypassing the tight security, Ehud continues to act like a Bruce Willis character by busting out a snappy one-liner. "I have a message from God for you," he declares shortly before whipping out his steel blade and shanking the evil, grotesquely obese King Eglon in the belly. Really, the only way to improve on this would be by shoehorning an awful pun into it, such as, "You should really cut down on your fat intake," or, "Looks like being king takes guts." As he leaves, Ehud shows he hasn't forgotten his good manners by considerately shutting the doors behind him. It doesn't say if he went flying across the rooftops Assassin's Creed style, so we're forced to assume he did. As bad as the delivery of that particular message from God went for Eglon, he got off lucky. As you see, sometimes God delivers the message himself.